Day in and day out, I receive comments like this from struggling Spanish learners. I don't know what to do every day. I don't know how to select from the huge number of resources available. I don't know how to get rid of some of my resources because I have too many. I just need a plan. I just need to stick with the plan. I understand, I really do. It can be incredibly overwhelming. That's how one of our students, Damaris, used to feel. But then something changed for him.
So whereas like before, if I was taking a class, it's just kind of like I'm trying to do the homework. I want to be ready for the next class. But now it's like the goal is like, no, I want to be able to talk. In order to have conversation, I gotta learn these different things. Before it's just kind of like you don't know how to split your time. You don't know why you're doing what you're doing. You're just trying to do something, but now it's like very targeted.
So what changed? How did Damaris go from scattered learning to targeted learning with a focus? And what are two different ways in which you could give your Spanish learning the clear direction it deserves? Let's talk about it. Comencemos, amigos. Hola mis queridos líderes del lenguaje, bienvenidos a otro video. Soy Erika. I'm a former Spanish medical interpreter turned Spanish teacher and language coach, now living and loving life abroad here in Mexico. I help Spanish learners who are learning for the purpose of relocation or deep communication with family, community, or colleagues speak with confidence in the situations that matter most to them and build the relationships that they so desire. If that sounds like you are in the right place, but it all starts with a solid plan. So if you're looking for a comprehensive study plan, then I suggest my Spanish Fluency Blueprint. You can grab that at ericareallanguage.com/blueprint or by going to the link in the description box. It'll show you how to break down any piece of Spanish material that you may have and transform it into output so that you are not only absorbing, you are able to use the language. All right, guys, in order for your learning not to feel scattered, you need a focus. And this is especially important if you're learning Spanish for a specific immediate purpose. Let's illustrate it like this. You're driving on your way to work. It's a 20-minute commute and you've given yourself a little leeway. You've left 30 minutes ahead of time. Plenty of time. But on the way, you remember how dirty your car is. So you pull into the car wash to get that taken care of. A few blocks later, you see a bookstore and remember, I've been meaning to pick up a new journal. Perfect. So you pull in to make that purchase. And then you notice that they finally opened the new restaurant that you've had your eye on for weeks. So you pull over to check out the menu. By the time you get to work, you're an hour late and nobody is happy about that. Well, it's not like you did anything bad on the way to work. In fact, each stop felt useful or even productive, like things that you really wanted or needed to get done. So the problem wasn't what you did, it was what you didn't do, which was stay focused on your main goal. Getting to work on time and leaving the other errands for another time or another day. Many Spanish learners feel really busy. They're doing a lot of things, but because they're not doing the right things for themselves at this particular time, their learning feels very unproductive, and more importantly, they're not reaching their goals, namely to have the conversations that they want to have that will lead to the relationships that they ultimately want to build. So now that we understand that we need a focus, how do we go about choosing it? Well, there are two main ways that I like to teach my students. But first, let's clarify this. To learn a language, we need two things. We need input. Okay, this is our listening and reading. And we also need output. And this is our writing and our speaking. Now, the input is like the gasoline in your car. Without that, you're not going anywhere. So you have to be constantly consuming the language through listening and reading. This is essential. If you don't have any gas in the car, there's nowhere you can go. You have nothing to output. But once you have that gas, you have a choice as to how to use it and where to go. And you do need to make that decision because it's a finite resource, just like your time. So input is essential. So when we talk about choosing a focus, today we're going to be talking about the output. Okay? But I wanted to clarify how important input is for you to even have the ability to output anything. Now, I like to think of two ways in which you can choose a focus for your output. We have a functional focus and mechanical. Now, functional goals or a functional focus, these are conversations. This is the way that you want to use the language. So you want to think about things like, who do you want to speak to? What do you want to speak about? You can even get more specific if you would like and think things like, when am I going to have this conversation? How am I going to do it? You can use all the question words, but the two most important ones are the who and the what. Who are you going to speak to? Who are you desiring to speak to? And what are the typical conversational topics that you would need, at least to start with, before the conversation goes in other directions? This is actually an exercise that I walk you through in my workshop, the Next 90 Days Spanish Workshop. In that workshop, you walk away with clarity as to how to take the general strategy that I'm describing to you and create a 90-day plan for yourself so that you can take care of your next Spanish speaking needs and get to your next Spanish milestone. I'll leave a link for you in the description, or you can go to ericaraylanguage.com/90days. But right now we are zooming in on just one part of this overall plan, which is how to choose a speaking goal. So back to this functional goal. Again, you're thinking who and what. So what are some examples of a functional goal? Being able to introduce myself and talk about where I'm from and what I do. Who would I typically have that conversation with? Well, someone that I'm meeting for the first time. So maybe I have close friends who are always introducing me to other friends. And then I have this opportunity to introduce myself. Or I'm living here in Mexico and all the time people want to know about me. Where are you from? What are you doing here? And so that's why I'm going to choose this as a focus. Or it could be describing what I did today. Why would you choose that focus? Well, maybe you tend to go out with your Spanish-speaking friends in the evening time and everyone's talking about this thing that happened at work and this thing that happened with their kids. And you want to be able to do that too, but you can't. So that's a focus. That's a functional goal that you could have. Or have a basic conversation with my in-laws about how my kids are doing. They're always wanting to know that, and I'm just kind of struggling through talking about what the kids normally do. And I'm just kind of piecing words together and struggling through that every time. Why don't I take a little while to develop that conversation, because it comes up all the time. It could even be something simpler, like ordering at a restaurant confidently and asking basic follow-up questions. Functional goals. How are you going to use the language and with who? So let's choose one of those examples that I just gave you. Let's choose being able to talk about what I did today. Now, as we know, learning how to confidently talk about that subject or any subject takes more than memorizing the list of vocabulary that you're going to need. You have to learn how to put those sentences together. So you need some grammar. So grammar is our second type of goal. This is the mechanical goal. Mechanical, the nitty-gritty of the language, which is usually going to be a grammatical focus. It could even be a pronunciation focus. If you struggle with that, you'll actually want to start with that as your mechanical goal above all else. But we're going to choose a grammatical goal here, and we're going to attach it to the functional one. But again, we want to be focused. So one way to get focused on the mechanical goal is to attach it to this functional one. So we've already said we want to talk about what we did today, okay? But in reality, when we're talking about that, we're going to be using a lot of different grammar. Every sentence, every paragraph, and certainly every conversation in Spanish is going to be using different tenses, different connectors. So our goal is not to take a deep dive into every single grammar point that we could possibly need for that conversation. We have to get more specific, and we want to choose one. So you may choose the focus of the past tenses, maybe even specifically one, the preterite past tense. We have a couple of different past tenses in Spanish. The preterite, we're talking about things that are over and done. This happened. And I'm thinking we're going to use that one a little bit more if we're describing what we did today. We also have the imperfect. So that is used to describe habitual, ongoing things in the past or things that we used to do. Like I would always study every day after school as a child, okay? We're going to use that one probably a little bit less, so we can choose the preterite past tense as our focus. So we have what I did today as our functional, and that is going to go in to the preterite. Past tense. Awesome. We have goals on both sides of the chart here. Now, how do we actually go about bringing them to fulfillment? Well, I do go into much more detail in that masterclass in the next 90 days Spanish workshop, but just to break it down for you really briefly, you can use a method that I call prepare, practice, present. It works wonders for my students. So first you'll prepare, you're gathering building blocks, you're learning the most important vocabulary and sentence patterns that you'll need to be able to describe what you did today. In this case, you're going to be really focused on how you're conjugating these past tense verbs because that's your focus right now. You can always get some help in this preparation stage with someone who can help you put your sentences together, organize your overall thoughts. Then you're going to practice, so you'll start using those pieces that you've gathered in low pressure ways. You can practice by yourself. You can build different sentences from what you learned, again, focusing in this case on the past tense. The practice stage is the time when you're training your brain to put the pieces together in different ways. And then it's time to present. So you use what you've prepared and practiced in real conversations. These could be simulated conversations with a teacher, speaking partner, someone who you're just practicing with. And then ultimately, you're going to present when you take this to the real world and you're there having dinner with your friends and you're talking about what you did today. That's the ultimate presentation. So let's prepare, practice, present. When Damaris, who you saw in the beginning, started doing this, suddenly all of the things that he was doing to learn Spanish became connected. He was still doing a lot of things, grammar, pronunciation, listening. And as he did his learning in chunks throughout the day to fit into his busy day, he knew that everything had a purpose.
I know I need to work on pronunciation. I need to listen. I need to speak out loud. I need to have conversation with a real person, talk back and forth. I need to learn vocabulary and I need to work on grammar. Like pronunciation, I do 10 minutes a day, you know, listening, I do like at least 15 to 30 minutes a day. So like really breaking up the studying. So it's like very targeted. I know what I need to be doing every day.
I'll include a link for you below to see more of Damaris's story. But I want to switch gears here for a moment because there is another way that we could do this, and it works especially well for more advanced learners who know quite a bit of Spanish and have been able to identify grammatical gaps, places where they really struggle with the grammar. In that case, whereas before we had started with a functional goal and we moved to the mechanical, we could actually do this in the reverse order. So we can start with the mechanical and move over to the functional. So let's say that you had already identified that you struggle a lot with the past tenses. Maybe it's specifically the preterite, or maybe it's the imperfect, or maybe it's both. Let's just say it's both. Let's say it's preterite and imperfect. When our goal is to really work on our grammar, because we're already conversational, sometimes we can get a couple of different focuses here at once. But here's the important thing, and this is where a lot of learners go wrong. They identify their grammatical gaps, and to try to fix it, they look up the rules. They drill themselves on the rules. They look at YouTube video after YouTube video. They're studying their grammar book, they're doing exercises, and they know the rules very well. And they understand the grammar very well. They could probably explain it to another person very well. But when it comes time to use it, it's just not coming out fast enough or accurately enough in their conversations. And this is because they're missing one key element, the functional goal. We have to attach our mechanical need to a functional goal. And this is because our brain needs an anchor. Because while language acquisition is very natural to our brain, studying grammar specifically as a hard subject is not so natural. As we all know and have experienced, although we can't remember, we learned our first language through repeated exposure and then repetition and imitating. And we did all of that without knowing what tense we were speaking in, what a preposition was. In fact, it's very normal if we don't remember what the parts of speech are called even now, because even though we learned them at school at some point later when we're already fluent in our language, that was only helpful to refine, but it wasn't necessary in order to learn how to speak. That was something that we were already doing by that point. But as adults, we typically don't have the same amount of time to spend immersed 24/7 in our new language. A lot has changed about how things work in our lives on a practical level. And we also have another language which is always trying to interfere with the new one that we're trying to learn. But even so, so much of the grammar is going to be absorbed naturally if you have enough gasoline, if you have enough input. But to speed up certain parts and to refine certain parts, it's okay for us to sometimes focus on the mechanical, but we need to attach it to the functional so that our brain has an anchor. So if this is your focus, you may do as many of my students have done and work on telling stories in the past. Your story. Things that you used to do growing up, your childhood, that's going to focus on the imperfect. Things that you did yesterday or this morning or what you did last week, that's going to be more on the preterite side. Always attach the mechanical to the functional. Create scenarios that are relevant and practical and useful for you and learn the grammar that way. It'll stick so much better. And there you have it, 2 different ways in which you can choose a focus for your learning. I would even go so far as to say that sometimes you can choose a purely functional goal without the mechanical, especially when you're in those beginning stages and you're learning the most basic grammar in a very general sense. You don't need to take a deep dive on any type of grammar. You learn the most basic parts so that you can start to put your sentences together, but your focus should be on your first practical conversations, introducing yourself, getting here, getting there, the very practical situations. Your focus is more in the functional. As you advance, your focus can move more to the mechanical without neglecting the functional. But the one thing that you should never do is focus purely on the mechanical and just learn the rules and drill yourself without putting it into any kind of context. It will just be so much harder that way. Again, in my workshop, the Next 90 Days Spanish workshop, I do teach you how to turn this system into a working system that you can use over the next 3 months, setting a relatively short-term goal so you can get it done and have real things accomplished in the next 3 months rather than kind of just spinning your wheels constantly. I also introduce you to several of our students who are applying this method and what they have been able to accomplish. I'm sure many of their goals match yours, so you'll find someone that you identify with. I'll leave that link in the description below, or you can go to ericareallanguage.com/90 days. I'll see you there.
Like it really helps you to really focus in on actually like becoming fluent. Like it's more than like checking a box to, say you did things. It really does put your mind in different space to where you think about like learning the language and speaking it like with the purpose